Lewis, you moved forward today, made places up today. How was the race? How was the car? And how are you feeling standing here right now?
I feel fine. Had a good first lap. Made some places up and then was really unfortunate under the safety car. But yeah, I enjoyed it to as much as I could.
So there's one more race in this Ferrari, and that's the end of your first year with Ferrari. What have you learned from it, and how much has it challenged you, do you feel, this year?
Definitely has been the most challenging year, both in and out of the car. There's been, I've got so many notes of in terms of things that we need to improve on. And time will tell whether or not we act upon those things, and if we keep hold of the things that are good and change the things that are not, and there's plenty of those. But there's literally no reason why we couldn't fix those if we just put those into action. I'm hopeful for us making progress.
What happened at Qatar 2025 with Hamilton was not just a bad result. It was a silent declaration of surrender, a breaking point, a message between the lines that says more than 1,000 words about the current state of Ferrari and the spirit of the seven-time world champion. Can a pilot speak without saying a single meaningful word? Lewis Hamilton, the man who marked an era in Formula One, crossed the finish line in Qatar 2025 without making a sound, but with brutal forcefulness. While others shouted on the radio, protested in front of the media, or gave tactical explanations, he limited himself to responding with phrases as empty as they were revealing. Just 9 words were enough to set off alarm bells. This time it wasn't frustration that got the best of him. It was calm. A calm that scares. Because when a driver like Hamilton stops fighting with rage and begins to accept the chaos that surrounds him with indifference, what is at stake is not just a result. It is his conviction. His competitive soul. After years of competing at the limit, demanding every tenth, every technical detail, every strategic maneuver, Hamilton finds himself facing a wall. And he doesn't try to climb it. He doesn't even try to take her down. He simply stops, looks at her, and says, "Same as always." A car that doesn't respond to you. A team that does not find solutions. A season that slips through his fingers. It's not just about a bad race. It's about what it means emotionally for a 7-time world champion to know he's powerless. Because when Hamilton no longer wants to change anything, something very deep has already been broken. And the big question is, are we seeing the beginning of the end of his career as a contender? Or does this attitude hide a silent strategy, a form of pressure on Ferrari to react? Formula One has seen many defeats, but none as disturbing as a Hamilton who chooses to remain silent. The 2025 Qatar Grand Prix was not just another disappointing race for Lewis Hamilton. It was the reflection of an emotional, professional, and symbolic breakup. The image of the British driver slowly getting out of his Ferrari after the race, without looking at anyone, without rushing, almost as if he did not want to return to his box, was not a coincidence. It was the exact portrait of the emptiness that is experienced when passion no longer finds an outlet. Hamilton started the weekend from the bottom of the grid, conditioned by penalties that relegated him to starting positions as low as P17 or even P18. But the most alarming thing was not the position. It was that it never gave the feeling of being in a race. He finished 12th, out of points, out of everything. And the most serious thing is that, for the first time in a long time, Hamilton did not look frustrated. He did not argue with his engineer. He didn't raise his voice over the radio. He did not demand adjustments or blame the strategy. There was no drama, no anger, no externalized disappointment. There was only indifference. And that, in a competitor like him, is the clearest sign of a total disconnection. Since Las Vegas, where he was eliminated in Q1 without even being able to set a competitive time, this trend had been emerging. But Qatar confirmed it. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a bump. It's a pattern. And that pattern reveals that Hamilton is experiencing one of the most difficult moments of his sporting career, not because of a lack of performance, but because of a lack of faith. His post-sprint quali interview was almost an emotional provocation. When a journalist asked him if Ferrari's new aerodynamic package had done any good, he responded with a terse no. And when they insisted on looking for something positive, he simply said, "The weather is nice." That's not a technical answer. It is a passive declaration of defeat. Ferrari historically has been a team of extremes. from absolute glory to deepest chaos in a matter of weeks. But what we are seeing now is something different. We are seeing a driver who came to resurrect a team and who, instead, is being absorbed by its structural dysfunction. Hamilton doesn't need a perfect car. He has already won with difficult cars. What he cannot afford at this point in his career is a project that is not moving forward. And in Qatar, that message was clear. The car is not responding. The structure does not react. And your motivation begins to evaporate. This context not only defines a career, defines a stage. And perhaps he is beginning to write the silent epilogue to the most ambitious chapter of Ferrari's modern era. The scene is brief, but the echo of his words continues to resonate. How difficult was it to drive the car today? Same as always. Did the new spoiler help? No. Is there anything positive for tomorrow? The weather is pleasant. In just 9 words, Lewis Hamilton condensed a frustration accumulated for months. But what is truly disturbing is not what he said. It's how he said it. Without emotion. No power. Without intentions to justify or explain. It is a flat, almost clinical emotional language that only appears in pilots when they have crossed a mental line. And in Formula One, when a driver stops fighting with his team, it is not about diplomacy. It's about disconnection. For years, Hamilton was the archetype of the emotionally involved driver. The one who even fought on the radio for a wing change. The one who discussed strategies in the middle of the fastest lap. The one who used his frustration as fuel to go beyond the limit. But in Qatar, his internal engine seemed off. Not because of physical fatigue, but because of psychological wear. And here an often ignored factor comes into play, the emotional isolation generated by an indomitable car. The SF-25 has been, since the first tests, a single-seater with erratic behavior. Unstable under braking. Unpredictable in traction. Whimsical with the setup. Hamilton, accustomed to years of precise feedback with the Mercedes, has come across a car that not only doesn't respond, but lies. Each session is an experiment. Every change a roulette. And that feeling of lack of control is lethal for the mind of a pilot of his level. Engineers try to fine-tune the platform. New spoilers, engine maps, adaptive suspensions are brought. Nothing seems enough, because the problem is not just technical. It is structural. Hamilton, instead of improving with each race, seems more disconnected, more resigned. There is no longer a demand to improve. There are no more public recriminations, just silence. And that, in this context, is thunderous. What we saw in Qatar was not just the frustration of a bad result. It was confirmation that the link between driver and car is broken, and that the relationship between Hamilton and Ferrari, in their first year together, already shows cracks that feel irreparable. When real dialogue between driver and engineers disappears in a team, performance is no longer the objective. Everything becomes emotional containment. And if Ferrari fails to reconnect with him soon, they risk losing something much more important than a race. Losing Lewis Hamilton as a believer in the project. This is the real threat. Not the performance of the car, but the lack of faith of the man who was to lead his resurrection. To understand the exact moment a pilot breaks down, you have to look beyond the statistics. Qatar was not just another race on the calendar. It was the result of a silent accumulation of technical frustrations, mental burnout, and broken expectations. And for Lewis Hamilton, all that took shape in a car that never became his. The SF-25 on paper promised to be an evolution of the SF-24. More stable, more competitive in fast corners, with an aggressive aerodynamic philosophy that aimed to close the gap with McLaren and Red Bull. But the reality has been brutally different. From the first laps in pre-season, the car showed unpredictable behavior. Oversteering in high-speed sectors. Chronic understeer in slow corners. Bad balance when braking. An extremely narrow tire temperature window. Hamilton, accustomed to cars with precise steering and a platform that responded intuitively to his inputs, found himself with an SF-25 that demands constant adaptations, without giving anything in return. And that's the most critical technical problem. It's not just a bad car. It's a deceptive car. It shows small signs of improvement in certain conditions, but has no solid foundation on which to build confidence. In terms of tuning, the engineers have tried everything. Modifying the rake, altering the rear suspension, implementing solutions in the diffuser to stabilize the rear axle in mid-corner. Nothing has been consistent. Every improvement comes with a new problem. When you gain speed on the straight, you lose traction when exiting the curve. When there is a load in the front, instability is generated in the rear. The car is at war with itself. And all this, race after race, is wearing down the driver. On an emotional level, Lewis has gone from the excitement of a new challenge to the frustration of stagnation. At Mercedes, he could influence the development of the car. His comments were pure gold. Here, at Ferrari, he seems to speak to a technical wall that interprets his inputs as data rather than sensations. That disconnection between pilot and engineer is lethal. Because when a driver loses faith in the team's ability to translate his feelings into solutions, his style is diluted. Hamilton has tried to change his driving. He has imitated Leclerc's style, releasing the accelerator earlier, loading more weight on the front axle, entering corners with greater speed. But even that has not given sustainable results. It has only disconnected him more from his essence. The worst thing that can happen to a driver like Hamilton is not to have a slow car. It's having a car you can't understand. One that doesn't respond to his instinct. And when that understanding does not exist, when each lap becomes an exercise in containment and not attack, motivation is diluted. It's not just about losing lap time. It's about losing purpose. Ferrari, unintentionally, is transforming one of the most intense and sensitive drivers in the paddock into an increasingly gray, increasingly quiet figure. And that is not a technical failure. It is a structural error in emotional and sports management. The Qatar Grand Prix was not just another race. It was a manifesto. A brutal and unfiltered reflection of what happens when the most successful talent of his generation is trapped in a project that does not respond to him. Lewis Hamilton did not lose on the track. Lost out of it. He lost when he stopped believing that his effort had a reward. And that, in Formula One, is more serious than any abandonment or penalty. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.